This is a presentation of the GED formula sheet of the mathematics section of the GED test. First, we're going to look at area and perimeter. In area, we'll first look at area of a square. So the formula for area of a square, area is side squared, since all four sides of the square are the same. And length times width would give you the area of a rectangle. Length times width, or side times side, or side squared, is the area of a square. So here, the side squared is 2.5 squared. And that'll give you your answer, 6.25. Area of the rectangle is length times width. So 3 times 5, which is 15. Area of a parallelogram is base times the height. The base is the bottom. The height is just the distance from the top to the bottom. It is not the slant. So as you see, it's 11 times 5, not 7 times 11. So 11 times 5 will be 55. And area of a triangle is 1/2 times the base times the height. So 1/2, or 0.5, times the base, which here is 18, times the height, which is 6. And that total will be 54. The area of a trapezoid is 1/2 times the height. You could also use 0.5 if you would rather use the decimal version, times the height, times base 1 times base 2. So one of the bases is the top horizontal line. The other is the bottom horizontal line. And the height is just the distance from top to bottom. It is not that AB slant height. So I plug in my height, which is 4, base 1, which is 6, base 2, which is 12, and say that times 1/2. So 1/2 times 4 times 18 will be 36. Area of a circle is pi times the radius squared. So that will be pi times the radius. Here the radius is 12 because the radius only goes from the middle to the outside of the circle. So pi times 12 squared, which would be 144 pi. So if you put pi times 12 squared in your calculator, you'll end up with 144 pi, which is not your final answer unless the answer is presented in terms of pi. If that is the case, then that's fine. But typically, you'll have to hit the convert button, which is just above enter on your calculator, and that will give you your total of 452.16. So with all area questions, you need to remember this is the covering of a surface, the covering of a square, of a rectangle, parallelogram. So we're looking at putting out, these are questions involving putting out seeds in a field, like a yard, carpeting, painting, covering something in some form or fashion. So it is going to be a covering, which is an area, which would be in square units, square feet, square centimeters, square miles. Perimeter is going to be the distance around the outside or something. So a frame, a border, a trim, something, a sidewalk around an area. Those are all going to be perimeter questions. So perimeter of a square is 4s, or 4 times the side. Each side is 2.5, so 4 times 2.5, or you can just, if you see it, 2.5 plus 2.5 plus 2.5 plus 2.5 will give you 10. The perimeter of a rectangle is twice, triangle below, should be rectangle below, is twice the length times twice the width. So either that, or remember this is 3, so that has to be 3. This side's 5, so that side has to be 5. Or twice the length, 2 times 5, plus 2 times 3. So 10 plus 6 is 16. And then perimeter of a triangle is just your 3 sides added up. 3 plus 4 plus 5 will give you 12. And circumference of a circle. Now, they give you 2 formulas for circumference of a circle. It depends on if you have the radius or if you have the diameter. Here we have a diameter, because the diameter runs from one side through the middle to the other side, as opposed to a radius, which a radius only runs from the middle to the outside. So if you just have radius, it has to be 2 times pi times radius. If it is a diameter, though, it'll be diameter times pi, which is what you have here. So if you plug into your calculator pi times 18, the calculator will give you 18 pi. You then have to convert it by hitting the conversion button, which is just above the enter button on your calculator, and you'll get 56.52. Now we move on to surface area and volume. Now, two things to remember real quick here. In these formulas, P is the perimeter of the base, like of the pyramid, the bottom around the perimeter of the pyramid. In area of B, capital B is the area of the base, which will be used in like right prisms and in pyramids both. So, surface area problems are problems where you're wrapping or covering a three-dimensional object, like this box here. If I were to wrap it with wrapping paper, I need to know how much wrapping paper to use. So I'm going to find out surface area. If you paint the box, you need surface area. So it's twice times the length times the width, plus twice times the length times the height, plus twice times the width times the height. So in other words, it means all 6 sides, the left and the right, the top and the bottom, and the front and the back. That's why it's twice each of those. So twice length and width would give you the front and then the back. That's twice. Length times height. Length times height. I'm sorry, that gives you the front. The length times the width will give you the bottom and the top. Yes. So you put all this in the calculator, and you'll get 60 plus 80 plus 24, or 164. Volume of a rectangular prism is just length times width times height. Volume questions involve filling a box, putting something inside of a cone, or if you're making pyramids for some model, how much clay do you need to make a pyramid? So with those, you'll use volume. So first volume is length times width times height. So the length times the width times the height. 10 times 3 times 4 is 120. Surface area of a right prism is going to be P times H plus 2 times the base. So perimeter, so the distance around the bottom, times the height. So perimeter, and I had to do the Pythagorean relationship because this is a right triangle. So it's 5 on this side, 8 on that side. So 5 squared plus 8 squared, and that gives me 89 if I'm not mistaken. So the square root of 89 would be 9.4. So that long side is 9.4. So that's my perimeter. 5 plus 8 plus 9.4. That's what's right here. Times 3, which is the height. You're just plugging things into the formula. Plus 2 times the base. Area of the base, capital B. So the area of the base is going to be the same as the area of the top. So half times the base times the height. And it doesn't matter which one you identify as base and height. As long as one of them is the base and one's the height, and you say half of those, that will give you the area of this part of the triangle. And then you got to do it twice because it's the top and the bottom. So then you 5 plus 8 plus 9.4, because that's your perimeter. That gives you perimeter 22.4 times the height, which is 3, plus twice the area of the base. Twice half times base times height, which ought to be 40. Then you multiply, add them up, and you get 107.2. The volume of a right prism is going to be area of the base times the height. So you got to get the area of the base, which is half times the base times the height, times the height itself. So half times the base, which is 8, times the height, which is 5, of the triangle of the area of the base, times 3, which is the height of the actual figure. And that'll be 60 when you put it all in the calculator. Next, we'll do surface area of a cylinder. So we're going to wrap a cylinder or paint a silo or can. So this one is twice times pi times the radius times the height, plus twice times pi times radius squared. So 2 times pi, which pi will be in your calculator, 3.14, which it tells you to use 3.14 on the formula sheet. Twice times pi times the radius, which is 6.4, times the height, which is 20.1, plus twice times pi, 2 pi, times the radius squared, 6.4 squared. So when I do this, I add them all up, and I'll get 339.10 pi, which will be 339.10 pi times pi will give you 1065, roughly. Volume of a cylinder is pi times radius squared times height. So volume is pi times the radius squared, 6.4 squared, times the height, 20.1. So pi times 6.4 squared times 20.1 will give you 823.296 times pi, which will be roughly 25.85, or 2585, sorry. Surface area of a pyramid will be half times the P times the S times the B. P is the perimeter of the bottom of the object. S is the slant height, so not the height like if it's a tent, but the height of the slant. And then B is the area of the base again. So 1/2 times the perimeter. Perimeter, since this side's 20 and that side's 20, that means the back's 20 and the left side's also 20. So 20 plus 20 plus 20 plus 20 give you perimeter. The slant height, as you see, is not 13. That's the regular height. The slant height is this guy, and that'll be 16.4 plus the area of the base. 20 times 20 will give you area of the base. That'll be 400. So half times 20 and 20 and 20 and 20 is 80 times 16.4 times 4, or plus 400. So you multiply all that and you get 656 plus 400, which would be 1056. And volume of a pyramid is 1/3 times the area of the base. Again, capital B is area of the base. Lowercase b is just base of an object. So 1/3 times the area of the base, 20 times 20, which is 400, times the height, which is 13. So 1/3 times 400 times 13 will give you 1733. Surface area of a cone is pi times radius times the slant plus pi times radius squared. So pi times your radius, which is 6, times the slant, which is 10, plus pi times the radius squared, 6 squared. So pi times 6 times 10 is 60, plus pi times 36. So 60 pi plus 36 pi will give you 96 pi. You convert it, and it's 301.44. Volume of a cone. 1/3 times pi times radius squared times height. So 1/3 times pi times, in this one, your radius is 2, so your radius squared will be 2 squared times 8. So 1/3 times pi times 4 times 8 will be 10.7 pi, converted will be 33.49. Surface area of a sphere is 4 times pi times radius squared. So 4 times pi times your 12 squared. 4 times pi times 144 will be 4 times 144 is 576 times pi, which is 1809. And volume of a sphere is 4/3 or 4/3 times pi times r to the third. So you plug in the 12 for the radius, and you'll say 4/3 times 12 to the third times pi. You get 2304 pi, which will be 7235. Now we move on to data. First, we'll look at mean. So these are dealing with data sets. So you have several things that occur, and you're analyzing the data. So mean is the total number, a total of the numbers, or the sum, divided by the number of items. So here's your example. Carly had test scores of 88, 92, and 96. What is the mean of her scores? So you add them up. 88 plus 92 plus 96. And there were 3 of them, so you divide by 3. So 276 divided by 3 will give you a mean, or an average, of 92. A median is the middle value of an odd number of values of data, or the mean is the middle values of an even number of values. The mean of the middle values. So let me explain. So Carly has test scores of 88, 92, and 96. What is the median? So first, always with median, you have to list from least to greatest, which they already are here, 88, 92, and 96. So the middle number is 92. Let's say she had 4 test scores, an 88, a 92, a 96, and a 100. Then the 2 middle scores, because of the 4, 2 are in the middle, 92 and 96 are in the middle. You have to add them 2, divide by 2, and you get an average or a median of 94. So when you have an even number of data in your data set, you have to average the 2 middle. If you have an odd number, you just pick the middle number. Mode, which isn't on the formula sheet, but it's just a good thing to remember, is the value in the data set that occurs most often. So Natasha counted days of rain during several months. Over 5 months, there were 18, 22, 12, 10, and 22. So as you can see, 22 occurs twice, so that is the mode. All other values occurred only once, so 22 is the mode. Now, there may be occasions where if she counted 6 months, and the next month there may have been 12 months, 12 days out of that month. So there would be 2 modes, 22 and 12. Sometimes there's not a mode. Sometimes everything only occurs once, so there's not a mode. Finally, we look at range. Range is the distance between the greatest and the least. So teacher observed the following numbers in his class, 18, 21, 20, 19, 13. What was the range? So it's the greatest minus the least. Greatest is 21, least is 13. 21 minus 13 is 8, so that's the range. Now we look at algebra. So the first one we're going to look at is slope of a line. Slope typically is symbolized by a lowercase m. So to find slope, you need 2 points on a line. So these little numbers out here just identify which set they come from. So this is the second y. This is not a square because the 2 is not up here. It's the second y. So here's your 2 points. Point 1, point 2. Point 1 is 3, 5. Point 2 is 8, 7. So we take y2. Here's y2. This 7 is the second y. So it goes first where y2 is. Minus y1. y1 will be that 5. x2 will be the second x value. Remember, these are x, y's. The 3 is an x, 5's a y, 8's an x, 7's a y. So the x2 will be an 8, x1 will be a 3. So 7 minus 5 will give you 2, and 8 minus 3 will give you 5. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Typically, y and x will just be there, and you plug in the slope, whatever it'll be. So if you use the previous formula to find slope, you'll plug that in there. Then you can take one of those points that's given to you and plug those in for x and y to find b. But b is always the y-intercept. It's where the line crosses y. So it's written typically like this, y equals whatever. And so y equals 3x plus 2. So your slope is 3, your y-intercept is positive 2. Point-slope formula is similar. Y and x will just exist. M is your slope, and this is your point, y1 and x1. So if you're given a point and a slope, you use the point-slope formula. So y1 is the y-coordinate of a point, m is the slope, x1 is the x-coordinate of a point. So if you're given a point of positive 4, positive 3, and your slope is 2, you plug the 2 in for slope. Your x1 will be 4, but it's going to be subtracted, so it'll be minus 4. And your y-coordinate will be 3, but it'll also be subtracted, so that's why it's there. Then we get to the quadratic equation. Quadratic equation is always set to y. Typically, it's always set to 0. So solve it for 0. So if you have a number out here, like an 8 or a 10 or whatever, you have to subtract that from the c or add it to the c, whichever. To get rid of it, you have to do the opposite or the inverse function to get rid of it. So you'll combine that with c. So you have 0 equals whatever it is. Then to solve, you make y equal to 0, then you factor it out. And your answer will be something like this, x minus 2 and x plus 4. You'll end up with 2 answers typically if you know how to factor out a quadratic equation. Another way to do it is to use the quadratic formula, which is this behemoth here. So once you have it set equal to 0, if you have it in this form, if it's set equal to 0, a is the number that's with x. Sometimes it's 1 or a negative 1. B is the number that's with just the x by itself. So a is with the x squared. B is with the X or the Y or Z or whatever letter they use. And C is the number that stands alone without a variable with it. And usually you'll have two answers. So let me show you how this works. So if we find the answers for x squared plus 8x plus 12. So A is going to be positive 1 because there is not a number written out there by x. So it'll be positive 1. B is going to be 8. C is going to be 12. So negative B, 8, plus or minus B, 8 squared, minus 4 times 1, which is A, and 12, which is C, all over 2 times 1. And you can put the addition version of this all in the calculator at once and solve it. It's just a little cumbersome. I would work it out a little bit first and then get down to it. But you just solve it out. 2 is, again, it's there, 2 times 1, because 1 is A in this problem. So you'll say negative 8 plus or minus, and I've squared the 8, and then multiplied 4 times 1 times 12. So it's 64 minus 48 over 2. So it's negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 16 over 2. So the square root of 16 is 4. So it's negative 8 plus 4 over 2 and negative 8 minus 4 over 2. So it splits out into two separate problems, negative 8 plus 4 over 2 and negative 8 minus 4 over 2. So negative 8 plus 4 will be negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Negative 8 minus 4 divided by 2 will be negative 12 divided by 2, which is negative 6. Then you have the Pythagorean theorem, which means in any triangle that's a right triangle, you identify one of the lines that touches the right angle as a leg, the other is the other leg, and the long side is always the hypotenuse. So the example I have here, find the length of the hypotenuse of a triangle where one leg is 15 and the other leg is 20. They may draw it out, they may write it like this. So you square A, we're going to say A is 15, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So A is 15 squared is 225, 20 squared is 400, C squared is C squared. So you add these two together, you get 525 is C squared. So you want to solve for C. So to solve for C, you got to get rid of the square. To get rid of the square, you get the square root. Square root of C squared, C, square root of 525 is 25. Simple interest, last three problems. Interest is equal to principal, which is the amount that you borrow or that you're loaned, times the rate, and that rate is always going to be given as a decimal. Typically, it's given as a percent in most interest problems, and you have to convert it to a decimal by moving the decimal places 2 places to the left. And then time is always in time of years. If it's just given as in months, you have to put it over 12 because it has to be the fraction of years. So what's the interest on a $12,000 loan? At 5% for 4 years. So 12,000 times 5% times 4 will be 2,400. Distance is rate times time. How fast you're going or how fast you're moving times at what time period you're using. If it's miles per hour, your rate is miles per hour and your time is in hours. So how far has a driver driven in 8 hours if she averages 55 miles per hour? 55 times 8 is 440. And finally, total cost. Total cost is the number of units times the price per unit. How much will 5 buffet meals at Estelle's cost if one of the buffets is $12.95? So you're getting 5 units, 5 people, eating at $12.95 per person. 5 times $12.95 is $64.75. And that's the math formula sheet in a nutshell.